so much for coming to see me. I'm really, really nervous, and when I am nervous, I go really, really awkward, so I apologise for anything that I do on stage today. My session is called Maximising the Middle, Strategies for Securing Success, and it's really looking at how we can get the best out of our so-called middle ability students. I think the first thing I need to say before I start this session is actually I don't like those terms. I don't like the term high ability, middle ability, and low ability. I think labelling students is dangerous because actually, when we say middle ability, what does that even mean? There are so many students in our classroom that we could say are middle ability students, but our students are individuals. They all have different needs. They are all different abilities. And so I think it's dangerous. I think it's a dangerous label. Our lower ability pupils, we offer them intervention, booster sessions. They're quite often our kind of focus on a whole school level. And similarly, like our higher ability pupils as well, those who would be labelled as high ability pupils, they're often things like for getting talented, opportunities. They're stretched and they're challenged. We quite often look at our grade 3 to 4 boundary leapers because we want to get our students into the statistic of students who pass. We look at our grade 7 plus students as well and focus a lot of our energy on them because again, we're judged on our grades 7 to 9, the amount of students in our cohort who fall under that boundary. And both of these groups, I think, are the ones that we naturally think of when planning differentiated tasks and resources. But then where does that leave our other students? I think actually our students are perceptive, aren't they? They're incredibly perceptive. And they know if you've judged them as a high ability student, a low ability student, or a middle ability student. And actually, if we're judging them as a middle ability student, how demeaning to them almost. And I think it's dangerous that they experience a loss of aspiration. They're not our focus because they're fine. They're chugging along. They're fine. They're going to get their 5. Let's focus our energy elsewhere. And actually, my kind of question is, when are we going to stop seeing students as statistics and see them as individuals? And what are we doing specifically to cater to their needs? So for this session, I'm going to go through some strategies that have just worked for me in the context in which I teach. They may not work for you, they may do. I hope you find something useful in this session. All of the strategies that I talk about, they're supported, yet they're designed to kind of build confidence in that safe environment. And I hope you find something useful. So I'm going to start with this, retaining knowledge through the big questions. This is something that I've been using a lot recently, and it's really, really working for our grade 5s, our grade 6s, and helping them to realise that actually they do know a lot, they can do a lot. And I'm going to use Macbeth as an example. So I asked my students, my year 10 students, why do you find Macbeth so difficult? What is it about that text that you find a real challenge? And they came up with all of these. Obviously, the obvious one, Shakespeare's language. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've battled with students when they say, oh, it's not even written in English, is it? So why are we studying it? But all of these other ones came up as well. There are lots of, a huge cast of characters, all with very similar names. We're teaching at the same time how to write essays. At the same time, we want them to understand that language and the plot. We want them to be able to discuss the social historical context, so they've got to learn all of the history behind that at the same time. We're throwing a confusing plot at them, assessment objectives, themes, topics, all of these things, and cognitive overload, they can't manage it. And that's why I find text like Macbeth is challenging text difficult, and it leads to anxiety. This is our past approach. This is what we used to do at our school, and some of you may recognise this type of approach. So we would start with Macbeth with a quick overview of the context, just to give them enough so they understand what's going to happen in Act 1, Scene 1 at least, role of women, witches, that sort of thing. We'd read Act 1, Scene 1, we'd probably get them to do a bit of analysis on Act 1, Scene 1, have a short presentation of the witches. We'd continue reading. We'd go through Act 1, Scene 5, Act 1, Scene 1 to 5, sorry. And then we'd ask the students to write an essay on the presentation of Lady Macbeth. Having just been introduced to her, they don't know that character at all. And yet we're asking, how does Shakespeare present Lady Macbeth? It just seems a bit nonsensical to me now. We'd ask students to probably write a paragraph of analysis on is this a dagger speech as well, so they get that in their minds. We'd read through and complete activities on Act 2. We'd probably spend about 15 minutes on the porter scene, because when students don't complete that. We then go on to study Act 3, C1, and on it goes. So this teacher bit, complete an essay, teach a bit more, complete another essay, and students lose knowledge of that play because they're focusing more on those exam skills than actually learning the text, and what's more, enjoying the text as well. So many students always say to me, I just don't like Shakespeare, and it really, really upsets me because I think there's so much there. They don't see the relevance of why we're teaching Shakespeare and the fact that Shakespeare's stories are still relevant in today's society. So this is what I decided to do this year. I've scrapped all of our Macbeth resources and I started again. And I thought, this is what I want students to learn first. I want them to understand the plot. I want them to get to know those characters. I want them to understand Shakespeare's language, the acting scene numbers, the social historical context, and then we can get on to the writing the essays and the tier 2 vocabulary and the analysing quotations and that sort of thing. And our students this year have been much happier, and I've even said to my attenders that I think they know this play a lot better than our previous cohort that have just finished. The reason that I think students find this difficult is people need to remember lots of complex, confusing things. I really feel sorry for our students. If you think the amount they need to know for English literature, let alone English language, let alone all of their other subjects, it's easy to be overwhelmed. So we want to make this, we want to push them, we want to stretch them, but we need to do it to help build their confidence. I'm just going to skip through this. We basically just need to ensure that they can remember and practice using key content and concepts in the subject. I got this slide from a blog by Joe Kirby, brilliant blog on how to use knowledge in English. But memorable knowledge is the best route to academic achievement. So my next task is to think, how am I going to make this memorable? So I researched this idea of big questions, and I know some schools do this already. This is something that my school we're relatively new to. So each lesson I give my students 1 or 2 key questions the students must be able to answer by the time they leave that room. They need to retain the answers to those questions as well. That's why they're big questions. Those are the things I want those students to remember. They allow you to express your aim with clarity and precision, so students know exactly what is expected of them in the lesson. It allows us to consider what knowledge we need our pupils to understand, and then actually what we want them to know, the things that would really make that student stand out. That can come later. But first of all, it's all about what we need those students to know. They ensure an understanding of the core concepts. And the last one, they're not learning objectives. I always hated learning objectives because I never understood them, and I'm still not entirely convinced that I understand them now. Because I was always told throughout training that learning objectives were measurable. And actually, I'm not entirely convinced that they are measurable, but this is. So these are the big questions that I've given to Macbeth. I've had to cut off week 6 at the bottom, but just simple questions designed to help students understand that play. And they're not challenging, they're not particularly challenging. That first question there, the second question, who is Macbeth? What reasons does Macbeth give for not going ahead with Duncan's murder? They're not particularly challenging questions, but you can challenge the students later on once they've got a knowledge of this. So they're quick, they're simple to ask, they're easy to check, and most of all, they're powerful. And I think, if you want to give students power, give them a knowledge of that text. Give them a knowledge of the text so they can go in and show what they can really do.